New rules, new drivers, and an exciting season ahead. This week we are doing a 2025 F1 season preview, so get ready because you've been summoned to the Steward's office. Hello everyone, and for the first time in 2025, welcome back to the Steward's office. I'm Saira, and I thought it was about time that we had a chat about the 2025 F1 season, because it isn't too long until we see Formula One cars back on track. Testing starts at the end of this month. It's the 26th, 27th and 28th. We've got F1 75 Live, which is that massive launch event going on at the O2 on the 18th of February. So there is a lot going on and a lot to look forward to. And yeah, thought it was about time we just had an overall look at what's going to be going on in the 2025 F1 season. And I can't lie, I am so excited for this season to start because I think it's going to be one of the most exciting seasons we've had in a little bit. The amount of new drivers that we have on the grid, I think it's 6 rookies that we have there. We have drivers that have changed teams. Carlos Sainz going to Williams, Lewis Hamilton moving to Ferrari, and I think that is one driver that everyone has got their eye on at the moment, just to see how he's going to fare when he goes to Ferrari. I just have a really good feeling about this season because we left 2024 on a pretty good note. We saw a lot of the teams closing up to each other, even if everyone wasn't competing towards the front. But you know, the likes of McLaren and Ferrari in particular battling it out at the front. Red Bull are trying to figure out and find their form again. Mercedes in it for a couple of races for a win. And then that midfield pack really started to close up, and there was a big battle going on there between Visa Cash App RB, Alpine and Haas. So a lot of exciting stuff going on in 2024, and just the note we left it off on there. If we can carry that momentum into 2025, I think it's going to be a really brilliant season to watch. And of course, this is the last year we have before we get that massive regulation change with the engines in 2026. And normally what we see with a regulation change is that the cars do tend to spread out a little bit more, and it's towards the end of that regulation cycle that they start to close up. And that's what we're seeing at the moment. So I think 2025 will be a good Formula One season. I'm expecting a lot more closer racing, a lot more on-track action. It's what I'm hoping for. I think it's what we are all hoping for as fans. But let's get into this 2025 preview, starting with some rule changes that are going on in F1 this year. Now, there have been a couple of rule changes that have come in for 2025. Not a whole load on the technical side to do with the actual aerodynamics and everything of the car, because like I mentioned, 26 is when that big regulation change is coming in. But cars are now going to be introducing cooling kits, and that's off the back of some of the heat exhaustion we saw from some of the drivers in Qatar 2023. So basically, if the FIA are predicting that we are going to have a temperature of over 30.5 degrees Celsius, there will be a heat warning given out to the teams, and the cooling kits will need to go onto the cars. Hopefully that will help when we're getting extreme heat and extreme weather conditions for the driver, so it's not going to be damaging their health. I think that's a pretty good change, to be honest. Driver weight has also been increased this year. That's going up to 80 kilograms, and that is to account for drivers that might be a little bit heavier or a little bit taller, but also just to look after driver well-being. So another good change coming in for the drivers. One thing I am sad about is that we are having the fastest lap point being removed. So no driver will be getting a point for fastest lap. The maximum amount of points on a normal Grand Prix weekend you can now get is 25 and not 26. And I can't lie, I am gutted about that change. Can't really tell why they got rid of it, why they thought they would just lose it. I quite liked it. Thought it brought something a little bit exciting to the table, especially towards the end of a race. People coming into the pits last minute to try and snatch that fastest lap point, but it is being removed in 2025. We're not going to be seeing it anymore. The FIA are increasing the number of rookie sessions though. So at the moment, every car has to field one rookie in one FP1 session throughout the season. Now it's going to be 2 rookies per car. Really good way to get some more younger drivers that experience in a Formula One car, and it also gives the teams a chance to see what talent is out there when they're in a current Formula One car on a track. So I'm very excited and interested to see who the teams are going to be picking this year, because some of the drivers that the teams would have picked are now rookies in F1. So I'm very interested to see, who in F2 or in their driver academies or maybe in a different series they will be bringing into their cars for those rookie sessions. The FIA have really tightened up on TPC, which is testing of previous cars. Current Formula One drivers that are on the grid can now only do 1,000 kilometers of testing over 4 days, nothing more than that. The FIA have also said that the teams can only use a track that's on the current F1 calendar or was on the F1 calendar the previous year. No other tracks can be used. You're not allowed to use a track within 60 days of that track holding an F1 race. And you also can't use a track that the FIA has deemed has had significant changes to it since the last race, which does make sense to me because you don't want drivers getting an unfair advantage by being able to go to that track, understanding what those changes are and getting an upper hand on the other drivers. So that does make sense to me. But yeah, big clampdowns when it comes to F1 testing. Qualifying and the final grid for Formula One has been changed because we had some issues going on in 2024 with these two things. So in the case that qualifying cannot be held on a Grand Prix weekend, what used to happen is that the race director, it was fully up to their discretion how they wanted to set the grid. If they wanted to use a free practice session or whatever it was, right? Wherever it was they wanted to use within certain limits, they could use that. Now there is a blanket statement and a blanket regulation that if qualifying can't be held, the championship standings are going to be used to set the grid. Kind of do get it. I do think sometimes using a free practice session can work better, but I also understand that sometimes in a free practice session, teams are doing different programs. They're not always trying flat out qualifying pace. They might be trying race pace. They might be trying different types of parts on their cars and different specs. So I do get it that practice doesn't always help set a grid. But yeah, regardless, they're now going to be using the championship standings. And in one respect, right, I'm glad that we have that rule out because it just gives us clarity and there's no umming and ahhing. We'll know what the grid is going to look like if qualifying can't be held. When it's coming to the final grid though, and this is also off the back of Brazil 2024 because it was messy, let's be honest, it was just there was a lot of confusion, all right? But the final grid will be determined an hour before the race. Cars that are withdrawn up to 75 minutes before the race start will not be included on the grid, and all the cars behind it can move up a space. Now, I think it was because of Alex Albon, right, that we had a lot of confusion during Brazil. His car had a lot of work that needed to be done to it, couldn't be done in time. Williams opted to withdraw his car, but it was very late on, and yeah, people were very confused about what places all the drivers would be taking. Would Alex Albon's space be left open? Would the drivers be able to move up one? A lot of confusion, but the FA are clearing that up, which is good. I think they have taken into account some of the problems that the drivers, the teams and the fans were also having in 2024. So it is good that they're trying to clear those things up for this year. Now, there is one set of rules that have come into place over winter break that have been quite controversial, and this isn't to do with anything on track necessarily, but it is to do a lot with public comments, especially from the drivers. So the FIA and Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the president of the FIA, have put stricter rules in place. Now, in 2024, they had said that they were clamping down on drivers swearing in press conferences and things like that. And if you remember, guys, and if you weren't watching the 2024 season, that's also fine. I'll catch you up now. But Max Verstappen last year, I think, had sworn in a press conference or during one of his media interviews. He got given community service for that and ended up having to serve that out in Rwanda during the FIA Awards. Charles Leclerc also ended up swearing by accident during a press conference, realised it very quickly and apologised, but he got given a fine and a suspended fine as well. The new rules have come into place though, and it's not just to do with if drivers are swearing. It includes that. It includes if they are bringing the FIA into disrepute. So any sort of negative comments towards the FIA. And also, I think any was it political and religious gestures or comments, right? All these things are coming under this umbrella and these new set of stricter rules. And I'm going to have to check my notes to remember this because it's a sort of 3 strikes and you're out system. So the first offence for swearing any negative comments about the FIA or any religious or political displays will give you a fine of €40,000. The second offence will then give you a fine of €80,000. And the third one is where it seems quite drastic. So it's €120,000 for your third offence, right? Okay, fair enough. On top of that, it looks like you're going to get a month suspension and you'll have points docked from the World Championship. Does this feel excessive? Yes. Now, I understand that sports people, athletes, when you're in the public eye, you are looked up to as a role model. And yes, I get it. You might not necessarily want, in terms of swearing at least, you're not going to want drivers doing that on live TV. Okay, fine. I would really like to know where the line is about negative comments about the FIA. Now, there obviously should be a line when it comes to it. You shouldn't be harassing anyone or threatening or anything like that. But if a driver does have a problem with the FIA or a decision, and they might just be saying, like, I don't agree with it, I don't think this is quite right, and I'm not sure what they're doing. You know, we've heard a lot of the drivers say things about the decisions that were made on a race weekend that they might not be happy with. Japan 2023, I want to say it was, maybe 22, when there was a lot of rain on track and a lot of the drivers were unhappy about why they were still on track, why it wasn't a red flag race. And they've come out and openly said that. So where's the line here where we say, nope, this is really negative and you need to be fined, and no, you are allowed to criticise your governing body. Within certain limits, you should be able to say when you aren't happy with something, especially when it's to do with your own safety. It feels like a little bit of a grey area at the moment, and yeah, I'm very curious how this is going to be taken by the drivers, because they already weren't too happy last season with the FIA wanting to clamp down on the swearing. A lot of them just feeling like the FIA was starting to treat them like kids, which I do get. They're grown men, they're driving extremely fast around circuits and adrenaline is very high. Those issues between the FIA and the drivers, it has been bubbling in 2024 a lot, you know, especially with the GPDA, you know, creating their own Instagram account and putting that statement out. I don't think this is something they're going to necessarily just take lying down. I feel like we are going to get a lot of comments about it, you know, when the media circle starts up now and the circuit starts up again in 2025 later on this month. I don't think it's a good idea, and I can't quite figure out what the FIA want to gain from this. Will it work? Will it stop the drivers? I don't know, because yes, that third offence, the punishment for that is really harsh. A month's suspension on top of docking points from the World Championship seems very excessive. But we will wait and see what happens. I'm very curious on what the drivers are going to say. Because like I said, this specific set of rules came out over winter break. The drivers are obviously away from the media. They're spending time with family and friends, as they should be. But yeah, when they're back into that world of F1 again, when the season starts up, I am very curious what they're going to be saying. But that's it on some of the rule changes. Very sad about fastest lap going, guys, I can't lie. And yeah, those offences and punishments for swearing and things like that, a lot gonna be going on, I think, in the media in 2025. Let's move on to the calendar though for this F1 season, and we don't actually have a lot of changes going on. Still have 24 races on the calendar, which I personally believe is still a little too many, but I don't think that's going to change. China, Miami, Belgium, and I'm gonna have to check my notes because I can't remember. US, Brazil and Qatar are the sprint races. Sorry about that, could not remember all the sprint races. China is an interesting one. Now, it's not that I didn't enjoy the sprint race last year, I did. But China is the second race on the calendar, so it will be interesting for the drivers and the rookies to only have one practice session out in China and then go into sprint qualifying, sprint quali, and then the race. So that's going to be an interesting one. Australia, though, is hosting the season opener for the first time in a couple of years, right? But for Bahrain and the Middle East, it's Ramadan over March when the season starts up again. So they're not going to be hosting the season opener. They're coming a little bit later on. but that does mean that yes, F1 is returning to Australia to open the 2025 season. Other than that though, the only other changes I think is that Azerbaijan and Japan have almost swapped places. So Azerbaijan is much later in the season now, it's after summer break, and Japan is then way earlier in the season, it's the third race. And yeah, very, very early on. And I think it's just to help geographically with all the teams and personnel travelling everywhere. So that does make sense to me. Moving on to our driver changes for 2025. And we do have a lot of them. I can't lie. We've got a lot of changes going on. We have 6 rookies on the F1 grid this year, and that's the most we've had in a really long time. And, you know, we've got some of these rookies joining teams that are fighting right at the top of the grid, and then some of these rookies joining teams that are at the bottom. So it's going to be interesting to see that sort of spread of rookies right across the grid. But we have Ollie Behrman, Kimi Antonelli, Liam Lawson, Isaac Hadjar, Gabriel Bortoleto and Jack Doohan all joining the grid this year. McLaren and Aston Martin, though, are the only teams who have not changed their lineup. So every other team has at least one new driver coming in, and McLaren and Aston Martin, the only ones that have locked in with the same drivers. So for Ferrari, we have Lewis Hamilton coming in with Carlos Sainz leaving, and that's had so much media attention, especially lately with him having his first day there, the first runs in that Ferrari car and all the Pirelli tyre testing as well. It's been really exciting to see. Red Bull, Sergio Perez is leaving with Liam Lawson coming in his place. Mercedes, we have Kimi Antonelli coming in the place of Lewis Hamilton. So, you know, a rookie driver coming in. With Liam Lawson in Red Bull, he's had a couple of races now with VCARB. Kimi Antonelli, though, really is a rookie in the truest sense of the word. He's done rookie sessions, he's done a lot of testing with Mercedes, but he's not actually driven in an F1 weekend. Alpine are seeing a rookie come into their team with Jack Doohan coming in and Esteban Ocon leaving. Now, Jack is an interesting one, and one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on just because of the rumours that we've had about him, right? So the rumours currently are that he's only got a contract technically up until Miami, and then there's an exit clause after that. And I think that's the 5th race of the season, right? And what rumours are saying is that Flavio Briatore wants Franco Colapinto in that seat, and Alpine have just signed him as their reserve driver for 2025. So I don't know. I think it's very performance dependent on Jack Doohan now as to whether he keeps the seat, according to the rumours, because nothing has actually been confirmed here, but there have been a lot of rumours about it, and yeah, I can't imagine how that's a feeling for Jack right now, whether they're true or not, but to have the media talk about this before your F1 debut cannot be a great feeling. But definitely one to keep an eye out for. My gut feeling is saying that Flavio really wants Franco in that seat. Whether it happens or not, though, is a different conversation entirely. But by the sounds of it, Alpine did pay a lot of money to get Colapinto out of that Williams contract. I don't feel like you do that just to keep him as a reserve driver. Haas are having an entirely brand new lineup. Nico Hülkenberg and Kevin Magnussen have left the team, and in their place we've got Esteban Ocon and rookie Ollie Behrman. Visa Cash App RB have a rookie coming in with Liam Lawson leaving. They've brought up Red Bull Jr. Isaac Hadjar. Williams obviously have Carlos Sainz coming in with Sargent vacating the seat midway through last season, and then obviously having signed Sainz before Colapinto was their driver. And then in Sauber, they have an entirely new lineup as well. They've got Nico Hülkenberg and Gabriel Bortoleto in those seats. So a lot of changes going on for the 2025 season, and it's a really stark difference to when we started 2024. And every single driver was in the same seat that they were in, that they ended in 2023. But it does make it more exciting, in my opinion. It's a lot more to sort of keep an eye on up and down the grid because, yeah, new drivers and drivers in new teams that you wouldn't expect them to be in. I am excited just because of that, to be fair. Let's have a chat about some of the teams that I think need to improve for the 2025 season, though. And I can't lie, I had like 6 teams on this list out of the 10 that we have. So bear with me here, right? But Mercedes is on this list, not in a massive way. I do think they had some improvements in 2024, but consistency still eludes this team, and I feel like they still don't fully understand what's going on with that car. So I feel like in that respect, yes, to be fighting right at the front for a championship, they need to have a more consistent car. Red Bull are also on this list. Now, they're not in dire straits, But obviously compared to the sort of dominance that they've had over the last couple of years, they lost that edge a little bit in 2024. And that you could tell by the fact that they came third in the Constructors' Championship. Max still won the drivers, which was amazing. But yeah, the car itself for the team is not as strong. So I think that's something in general they're going to want to see improve. I think those are the two teams that I think need just small improvements. But then the rest of them, I think I've got on this list need bigger improvements in a nice way. You know, I want to see all the teams do well. Aston Martin were completely in no man's land in 5th place last year. They were struggling for pace across an entire weekend at times. They weren't able to fight at the front. There were times where the teams behind them were able to catch up with them. They really aren't where they want to be. We don't hear a lot about them anymore, you know. I think 2023 is when they had a really good start to the season, and in 2024 we heard nothing really. You know, there were points where they weren't getting into Q3. The car didn't seem great. The race pace, the quali pace, it just wasn't great. And I think they're going to have a problem if teams like Alpine and Haas are improving and catch up with them, because that 5th place then is not assured for them. Visa Cash App RB, I mean, they started 2024 quite strong and they looked like they were going to secure 6th place. And I think they ended up in 8th place in the end because they chucked upgrades on their car at one point and it all seemed to fall apart from there. The car and the upgrades didn't work the way that the team were expecting it to. There were points where they had old spec and new spec parts on the car, a Frankenstein car, to see if it would work and try and get a better understanding. So there was a lot of promise with VCAB that I was gutted to see didn't carry on for the rest of the season. And I'm hoping that they figured out what's going on, ready for 2025. The more teams, the more cars we get in that midfield battle, the better it is at the end of the day. Williams, right, they're on this list, but to be honest, they had a lot of damage in 2025 that really stopped them from being able to bring any kind of upgrade to their car because they were focusing on making spare parts then. So it's kind of hard to say that they need to improve when we don't really know what they had in the works anyway. And James Wells had already said that's had an impact on the 2025 car. They are going to start focusing on 2026. So I'm not expecting a whole load of improvement from them. And it's hard to say that they need to improve when, yeah, like I said, we don't really know what they had in the works, had those crashes and all those spare parts not need to be made. And finally, and I don't think this is going to surprise anyone, right? Sauber is on the list. They scored one single point last season that came quite late on in the season. It was dire straits for Sauber. It was a hard season for them and it was a hard season to watch, you know. I'm hoping that this season will be better for them. I'm hoping it's a little bit, you know, the race pace, the quali pace, there's something there for them to sort of hold on to and that they might potentially be able to get into double digits with their points this year. There were multiple points that season in 2024 where I did not think Sauber were going to score a single point. They did, thankfully, thanks to Zhou Guanyu. But yeah, there is, I think, a lot of scope for improvement with Sauber, but I can't figure out whether they just have put a lot more attention on that 2026 Audi car. And from the sounds of what Matteo Binotto said in interviews before he had joined, that's definitely what they were doing, which is why I think they are on the back foot at the moment. So I am curious to see whether or not we see any improvement with Sauber or whether, yeah, they're just going to completely focus on 2026. And to be fair with a lot of the teams, and I think all of them, it's going to be very early on in the season, I think, potentially, that they will start swapping all of their attention over to that 2026 car and engine because of that massive regulation change, especially with the engine. So I don't feel like teams will see drastic improvements in the middle of the season. And we might, you know, if a team can figure something out and unlock it, it might unlock a lot of pace. But I think for a lot of the teams, focus is very quickly going to shift on to 2026, especially if they know they've got a decent race car. Yeah, I was going to chat about drivers that need improvement, but it's kind of hard to say, I think, with drivers. And I think what I have are drivers, not so much that I say would need improvement, but drivers that I'm just hoping have a good season. And that does go for all the rookies, right? I want them all to have a decent season. And when I look at Liam Lawson and Kimi Antonelli in particular, they've got a lot of pressure on their hands, right? Liam Lawson is joining a team with the reigning world champion, with a 4-time back-to-back world champion in Red Bull. And we know from Max's previous teammates, Max is not an easy driver to go up against. At the end of the day, you know, he is a very talented driver, has very good speed. and has that experience over Liam Lawson as well, you know, and that counts for a lot. So I am hoping that Lawson has a decent season and can hold his own a little bit against Max, you know. I don't think anyone's necessarily expecting him to be on the same level, but he's still in that fight with other drivers. He is able to get a decent haul of points on a race weekend. And with Kimi Antonelli, once again, he's stepping into a very good team with Mercedes. It's like I said before, Liam Lawson has at least had a couple of races with VCARB. Kimi Antonelli has not had that, so he really is going in quite fresh when we see him out in Australia. Obviously, 3 days of testing out in Bahrain, but you know, the pressure you have on a Grand Prix weekend is very, very different. So I'm hoping that he also has a decent year. A lot of eyes, I think, are going to be on Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari, and I'm hoping that he settles in well to that team, that the car is decent and he enjoys driving it and has a good season with them. I would love to see him win in red. Alex Albon, I think for him, this is going to be a season where he needs to show that he can go toe-to-toe with Carlos Sainz. Carlos is a fantastic driver, and so is Alex, but I think this for Alex Albon, while he's been in Williams, is the first driver that I think is really going to push and challenge him. And we saw some points against Franco Colapinto. Albon couldn't consistently get the better of Colapinto. So I'm curious with Carlos Sainz what that's going to be like. But yeah, other than that, I think Oscar Piastri was the other driver. I think he's just going to want to get closer to Lando Norris and want to be in that fight right at the front with his teammate. Having a chat, though, about the Constructors' Championship and what I think is going to happen there and what it looks like is going to happen there, right? And once again, if we look at what happened in 2024, I think what we're all expecting at this point really is that fight to be between McLaren and Ferrari. And yes, obviously things can completely change and we don't know what the teams have developed over winter break. But I think a lot of us are seeing that battle be between McLaren and Ferrari. If Red Bull can kind of figure out what's been going on with their car and fix any of the issues that they might have had, I can see them being in that fight. Mercedes, I don't think are consistently going to be in that fight. I think it's going to be a lot like what 2024 was for them. There will be moments where that car is going to be very, very strong and they might be able to win the races here and there, but I don't think it's going to be consistent enough for them to be fighting for the championship. Midfield battle looks like it's going to be really, really strong this year. And I mentioned before about Aston Martin. I think they are going to have to look over their shoulder a little bit this year if they can't improve that car drastically. Haas and Alpine left the season really, really strong in 2024. I was so impressed with the race pace on both of those cars. And can I say Alpine in particular, I don't know what happened in the middle of the season, but whatever upgrades they brought to Pierre Gasly's car seemed to work for that team so well. So I hope that's momentum they can carry on into 2025. Haas seem a lot more consistent and well put together. VCARB, I think they are buying parts from the RB19 for the 2025 season. So I'm hoping that helps give them a little bit more direction that they seem to lose in 2024. But I definitely think at least Alpine and Haas are going to be battling now with Aston Martin. And realistically, I think Williams and Sauber are still going to be struggling. And Williams is genuinely because of what James Vowles has already said, you know, in terms of the 2024 crashes already impacting the 2025 car and them then wanting to switch their focus to 2026. I don't have a whole load of hope for Williams. However, I think we did see some glimpses of really good race pace from both of the drivers, Colapinto and Albon last year. So I think Albon and Sainz will be able to get points for the team. I just think it's going to be a bit of a struggle this year, but hopefully the payoff will be there in 2026. Sauber, like I mentioned, because they're becoming Audi, I can't see them doing a vast amount of improvement right now. I could be wrong, and we've also seen how Nico Hülkenberg has driven a Haas that has not always had great race pace and managed to get it into the points, managed to get it into Q3. So they're going to be an interesting team to watch, but I genuinely do think Williams and Sauber are still going to be trailing behind everyone. The WDC, though, and who I think is going to be fighting for that top prize to get that World Championship, I think it will realistically be a battle between Lando and Charles. I am hoping that Lewis is involved in that fight, and I do think there is also a chance that Max could be involved in that fight as well, because there is every chance for both of those drivers. As long as they've got a decent enough car, it doesn't have to be the best car, but as long as they are comfortable in it and can drive it, I think they could be fighting for it as well. I think there is the possibility that Oscar could be involved in that championship fight. A lot of it is going to be how much learning he has applied from 2024 into 2025. And he is a driver that is like a sponge, you know. He is able to absorb a lot of that information and apply it to his driving. And we've seen that since he's joined the grid. So there is a good chance that he could be fighting for it as well. And I'll be very interested to see how McLaren would handle it if both of their drivers have a chance at a championship. I just think it's going to be quite close for the WDC this year, honestly, whether it's 2 drivers fighting for it, 3, 4, 5, whatever. I think it's going to be very, very close. And the rest of the grid also very close. And I think there'll be a lot of changes throughout the year. Realistically, right now, I can't see Max sealing his 5th world title in 2025. And I could be wrong, but I think the way the Red Bull car has been and how strong the other cars have seemed around him is why I would say that he might not be able to do it. But he still could be in that battle, and I could be very, very wrong, and he could win it for all we know. It's just going to be a really interesting season, guys. There is so much going on. Everything I've just ran through there are so many changes. And, you know, I'm saying who I think is going to be in that battle for the WCC and WDC, and a lot of it is based off what we saw in 2024, but we have seen cars drastically change. Going into testing, going into the first race, you know, a couple of races into the season, you know, a team brings upgrades to the car and it works so well. So I really don't know what's going to happen, and it could be very unpredictable. I didn't think McLaren were going to win the Constructors, Ferrari would come in P2, and then Red Bull would only land in P3. I really wasn't expecting that, and I don't think a lot of us were when 2024 started. So there is a lot that could happen, and I'm sure things are going to change. But that is my 2025 season preview. My next episode should be, I think, at least my 2025 predictions. And if not, it will be coming up. But my point here is that my predictions form is out. Head over to my TikTok, Threads, or my Blue Sky. I do have that now. I've finally got it over winter break. But the link will be there. Please fill out that form. I'll put the link in the show notes as well. Fill out the form and let me know what you think is going to happen in the 2025 season. I'll collate all of those results and have a chat about them in my predictions episode, because I love seeing what everyone thinks is going to happen and then having a review of it at the end of the season to see how wrong or right we were. But thank you guys so much for listening. It is so good to be back, and the awesome Saira for sticking around. Make sure you follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Stewards_office, and I will see you guys the next time you're summoned to the Stewards office.